Over the past 15 years, China has launched more missions to the moon than every other nation combined. This is not just a handful of spacecraft. We're talking about a relentless parade of orbiters, landers, rovers, and a mechanical explorer that plunged into the most lightless craters imaginable, plus a vessel that seized rock samples from a location no human being has ever set foot on and hauled them across 250,000 miles back to our planet. And believe it or not, this is merely the opening act. Now, here is the revelation that stops people in their tracks. China is not pursuing this because it craves a trophy. It is pursuing this because the moon is concealing something that could revolutionize how we venture across the entire solar system for all time. Something crystallized, something primordial, something that has been resting in absolute darkness for eons beyond counting, simply waiting to be discovered. If you're captivated by narratives like this, smash that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. By the conclusion of this video, you are going to grasp precisely why China continues returning, what they're genuinely hunting for, and why whoever cracks this mystery first could command the destiny of space exploration itself. Let us dive in, advancing one milestone at a time, never hesitating. Most nations that dream of reaching the moon attempt to plant a flag immediately. China pursued a radically different strategy. Back in the early 2000s, their engineers gathered and architected a roadmap that would span entire decades to execute, not because they lacked urgency, but because they possessed strategic brilliance. Every single expedition was engineered to deliver knowledge they would desperately need for what followed. Nothing was squandered. Nothing was squandered recklessly. The blueprint contained 4 critical phases. First, circle the moon and scrutinize it exhaustively. Second, physically descend onto its surface. Third, extract fragments of it and return them to Earth. And fourth, establish something permanent up there that endures. Each phase demanded flawless execution before advancing to the subsequent one. Imagine constructing a towering skyscraper. You do not install gleaming glass panels before the structural steel framework is erected, and you absolutely do not mount the rooftop before laying the concrete foundation. The inaugural mission rocketed skyward in 2007. It was designated Chang'e 1, honoring a legendary Chinese moon deity from timeless folklore. This spacecraft orbited the moon for over a year and generated some of the most intricate cartographic data of the lunar terrain ever assembled at that moment. No spectacular touchdown, no human suspense, just pristine surgical data that researchers could genuinely exploit. The caliber of intelligence that engineers could analyze for years and methodically transform into actionable strategy. 3 years after that, Chang'e 2 sharpened those charts to unprecedented resolution. Scientists could now magnify individual craters, geological ridges, and mountainous formations and determine with absolute certainty where landing a spacecraft would be secure without it collapsing or plunging into an unstable regolith. These expeditions did not dominate newspaper headlines the way a crude rocket launch would. But beneath the surface, they were accomplishing something equally monumental. They were constructing a master plan that would orchestrate every single mission that emerged afterward. And what emerged afterward shattered what we believed we understood about the moon completely. The breakthrough that demolished the textbooks. In 2013, China executed its first genuine power move. Chang'e 3 became the first machine to achieve a controlled landing on the moon since the 1970s. Absorb that reality. Nearly 4 decades had elapsed without a single gentle touchdown on the lunar landscape. And then, silently and with surgical precision, China accomplished it. Riding aboard the lander was a compact robotic rover designated U2, which translates to Jade Rabbit in Chinese. It rolled off the platform onto the ash-grey, powder-covered surface and immediately commenced operations. Within mere days, U2 stumbled upon something nobody anticipated: the geological specimens. They were fundamentally different. For decades, everything planetary scientists understood about lunar rocks originated from the Apollo expeditions. 12 astronauts had walked across the moon and transported samples home, and researchers had been dissecting those identical samples ever since. They had constructed an entire conceptual framework of the moon's composition based on those specimens. Academic textbooks were published, scientific models were developed. A complete geological narrative was established, And that narrative, it became apparent, was tragically incomplete. U-2's sophisticated instruments analyzed the regolith and adjacent rock formations and discovered a category of volcanic rock that matched absolutely nothing in the Apollo archive. The chemical signature was alien, the mineral arrangements were unprecedented. It was like uncovering a completely revolutionary recipe. In a cookbook, you assumed you had already memorized front to back, not merely a modified version of the same preparation, an entirely distinct culinary creation. What this revelation communicated to scientists was staggering. The Moon is not some simple homogeneous boulder drifting through the void. It is geologically intricate, with territories that crystallize through radically different mechanisms across vastly different epochs. It harbored volcanic activity in zones that no previous mission had ever investigated. And the regions Apollo touched down in, those were merely a minuscule cluster of pinpricks on an enormous map that extended millions of square miles in all directions. The Moon we thought we comprehended was just a microscopic fragment of the authentic story, and the remainder of the story had never been investigated up close whatsoever. So, if the territories we had already explored were already astonishing us, what else could conceivably be lurking in the locations we had never even glimpsed? That question did not remain unanswered for long. Descending, where no one possessed the courage to venture, the Moon perpetually displays the identical face toward Earth. That is not happenstance. The Moon rotates at precisely the correct velocity so that one hemisphere faces us perpetually and the opposite hemisphere, the far side, is forever oriented away into infinite space. You can position yourself anywhere on Earth, gaze upward at the Moon every evening for your complete existence, and you will never once witness what exists on the reverse side of it. Not even with the most formidable telescope ever constructed. Landing on the far side had long been regarded as fundamentally impossible. The instant a spacecraft makes contact there, it loses communication with Earth instantaneously. There is no visual pathway, no method to transmit commands, no technique to obtain data, no mechanism to determine if catastrophe has struck. It is like attempting to converse with someone imprisoned in a sound-proof chamber with no apertures, no cellular signal, and no way to knock on the entrance. China resolved this through one of the most ingenious solutions anyone had ever conceived. Before even launching the lander, they dispatched a compact relay satellite and positioned it in a meticulously calculated orbit beyond the Moon where it could observe both Earth and the far side simultaneously. Now, transmissions could ricochet between the lander and Earth through the satellite, like a reliable courier sprinting back and forth between two individuals who cannot perceive each other directly. Elegant in concept, extraordinarily challenging to execute. In 2019, Chang'e 4 descended into a crater designated the South Pole Lake and Basin. This is one of the most colossal impact craters in the complete solar system. It extends more than 2,500 kilometers across. To provide perspective, that solitary crater is approximately the dimensions of Western Europe. Scientists theorize it is so profound and so ancient that it may have penetrated completely through the Moon's exterior crust and revealed material from deep within the lunar interior. Material that had been entombed since the Moon initially coalesced. Then in 2024, Chang'e accomplished something even more breathtaking. It did not merely descend on the far side. It descended, excavated approximately 2 kilograms of primordial rock and regolith, hermetically sealed it inside a containment vessel, ignited a miniature rocket off the lunar surface into orbit, rendezvoused with a waiting spacecraft circling overhead, transferred the invaluable cargo, and piloted it all the way back to Earth. Every single one of those procedures had to function flawlessly. None of them had ever been undertaken from the far side previously. The geological samples that returned were approximately 2.83 billion years old and exhibited unmistakable evidence of volcanic activity far beyond when anyone had forecasted. The Moon did not fall dormant as prematurely as scientists had assumed. Its geological chronicle extended much longer and much more mysteriously than the academic literature had ever documented. And with each fresh sample, each new touchdown, each new rover, the picture kept expanding more convoluted and more mesmerizing. But here is the critical point. As extraordinary as all of that was, it remains not the primary objective. The genuine treasure China is pursuing exists at a completely different section of the Moon entirely. What is concealed in the absolute darkness? Step outside on a cloudless night and observe the moon. Now visualize the very bottom of it, the South Pole. On Earth, the polar regions are frigid and blanketed in ice. On the moon, the South Pole is something far more bizarre and far more extreme than anything you would anticipate. Because the moon barely tilts on its rotational axis, sunlight strikes the South Pole at an incredibly shallow angle, skimming across the terrain like a flashlight positioned nearly horizontal. Some craters near the pole are so profound that the surrounding walls obstruct every photon of sunlight absolutely. Not for a rotation, not for a season, not for 100 years. Some of these craters have existed in total blackness for more than 1 billion years. No illumination has contacted their floors since long before any biological organisms existed on Earth. Inside those craters, the temperature plummets to -200 degrees Celsius. That is more frigid than the surface of Pluto. It is one of the coldest natural environments in the complete solar system. But here is what makes that cold incredibly electrifying. Scientists are convinced those freezing, pitch-black crater floors are stockpiling frozen water ice. Over billions of years, comets and asteroids transporting water collided into the moon. Most of that water vaporized, evaporated, or drifted away into the void. But in those permanently shadowed craters at the South Pole, the water had absolutely nowhere to escape. It simply remained there, frozen solid, impeccably preserved for hundreds of millions of years, like provisions stored in the rear of a freezer nobody ever accesses. Now, contemplate what water genuinely signifies in space. Water is composed of two elements, oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen is what astronauts respire. Hydrogen is one of the most potent rocket propellants we have ever engineered. If you can excavate that ice, fracture it apart, and transform it into breathable atmosphere and usable propellant, then the moon ceases being merely a destination. It becomes a refueling depot, a supply warehouse, a gigantic fueling station positioned right adjacent to Earth, prepared to dispatch spacecraft deeper into the solar system without having to transport all that massive, expensive fuel upward from Earth's surface. Extracting anything off the ground on Earth demands a staggering expenditure of resources, because our planet's gravitational field is so powerful. The moon's gravity is only approximately 1/6 of Earth's. Launching propellant from the moon into space would require a fraction of what it demands from home. Future expeditions heading toward Mars or toward the moons of Jupiter or even farther outward could halt at the moon, refuel completely, and continue onward. The moon could become humanity's first off-planet supply station. And whoever constructs it first will possess a strategic advantage on everything that follows afterward for generations. This is why the South Pole matters so profoundly. This is the authentic reason China keeps returning mission after mission after mission, year after year. The robot that leaps into darkness. To genuinely locate and verify that water ice, you cannot simply orbit overhead and formulate educated hypotheses. You have to venture into those dark craters directly. But conventional rovers operate on solar panels. No sunlight translates to no energy, and wheels cannot navigate the razor-sharp, jagged, completely unpredictable landscape inside a crater that has sat undisturbed for 1 billion years. China's solution to this challenge is a mission designated Chang'e 7, currently scheduled for launch in 2026. It is the most technically audacious lunar mission China has ever conceived. And it arrives with something that has never been deployed before in the entire history of lunar exploration, a compact robot that can leap. Instead of gradually rolling across the surface on wheels, this hopping probe can vault directly into the permanently shadowed craters. It carries instrumentation that can detect water molecules in the atmosphere and regolith, identify hydrogen signatures, and analyze frozen deposits embedded deep beneath the surface. It ventures in, executes its mission, and evacuates from locations that would annihilate a standard rover within minutes. Envision it like dispatching a frog into a pitch-black cavern instead of attempting to maneuver a vehicle down there. Agile, rapid, and engineered for an environment where nothing else can survive. The comprehensive Chang'e 7 mission also encompasses an orbiter circling the South Pole territory from high altitude, charting the terrain and transmitting signals back to Earth. A lander will make contact on stable terrain near the pole, From there, a rover will traverse across the surface, investigating the regolith composition and identifying targets for the hopping probe. All four components collaborate together as a single synchronized team, perpetually feeding intelligence to each other and back to the scientists monitoring on Earth. If Chang'e 7 returns with definitive confirmation of substantial water ice deposits resting in those ancient craters, it would rank among the most crucial discoveries in the history of space exploration, not just scientifically thrilling, but practically world-transforming, because it would demonstrate that everything humanity requires to commence living and operating beyond Earth is already positioned there waiting, billions of years old and perfectly preserved. And confirming the water is only phase 1 of what follows next. Constructing a home that was never shipped from Earth, discovering a resource and genuinely utilizing it are two radically different challenges. You cannot simply excavate ice and declare it a base. You require technology that can endure with no oxygen, extreme temperature fluctuations between day and night, constant bombardment by radiation, and microscopic dust that infiltrates every gap and junction in every machine ever manufactured. You require systems that can function for months or years without a human hand calibrating them. You require, essentially, to master how to construct on the Moon, utilizing only the Moon itself. That is the central objective of Chang'e 8, currently planned for approximately 2029. This mission is concentrated entirely on validating something engineers designate as in-situ resource utilization, which simply translates to using what is already present instead of shipping everything from home across 238,000 miles of empty vacuum. One set of experiments would attempt to heat and compress lunar regolith into solid construction blocks. Conceive of it like firing bricks, but instead of clay excavated from a riverbank, you are utilizing the same dusty grey surface material that blankets every inch of the Moon. Those bricks could eventually be deployed to construct flat, robust landing platforms that minimize the hazardous clouds of dust thrown upward every time a rocket makes contact. They could form protective barriers around habitats, shielding astronauts inside from radiation. They could pave pathways for rovers so machines do not have to struggle through loose regolith on every single journey. Other experiments will investigate extracting oxygen directly out of lunar minerals. The Moon's soil is saturated with oxygen, but it is chemically bonded inside rocks rather than floating freely in the atmosphere. The correct process can rupture those chemical bonds and liberate it. Some designs being evaluated involve robotic 3D printers that utilize lunar regolith as raw material to gradually construct structures from the ground upward layer by layer. The identical way a 3D printer at home builds a plastic prototype, but on a much grander, much more consequential scale. Autonomous robots could print walls, floors, and curved protective domes long before any human crew ever arrives to occupy them. If these technologies function in the authentic environment of the Moon and not merely in a laboratory on Earth, then everything transforms. You would no longer require launching construction materials from the surface of Earth. The Moon would help construct itself. And once the building blocks are positioned, the strategy that all of this has been directing toward finally becomes achievable. Ask, the base that could define the next century, Askarif. Everything described so far, the meticulous orbiters, the rover breakthroughs, the far-side landings, the water hunt, the construction experiments. It all channels into one ultimate objective, a permanent research station at the Lunar South Pole. China designates it the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS for short, and it is one of the most ambitious space infrastructure projects ever seriously proposed by any civilization. The construction timeline is scheduled to commence in the early 2030s. Robotic missions will arrive first, delivering power generation units, communication towers, and scientific laboratory modules. Machines will handle the harsh, perilous early construction operations before any astronaut even boards a rocket heading that direction. Over several years, the station will expand larger and more capable module by module until it can sustain human crews remaining for weeks or months at a stretch. China is also inviting other nations to participate in this project, and the response has been remarkable. Dozens of countries have already expressed interest in contributing experiments, technology, or personnel to the ILRS. That signifies this would not just be one country's outpost, it would be a shared human facility on another world, with China providing the foundation and others constructing alongside. On the crewed mission front, China has been steadily validating everything required for astronauts to reach the lunar surface before the conclusion of this decade. The Long March 10 rocket, powerful enough to lift approximately 27,000 kilograms into lunar orbit, successfully completed a critical low-altitude test flight in early 2026. The Chang'e crewed spacecraft passed a vital emergency abort test around the same period, proving it can keep astronauts protected even if catastrophe strikes during launch. 2 rockets will be mandatory for each crewed lunar mission. One transports the crew in their spacecraft, the other transports the lunar lander. They rendezvous in lunar orbit, dock together, and then 2 astronauts transfer into the lander and descend to the surface. The initial astronaut visits will likely endure only a few days, but those first brief stays are not the destination. They are the proof of concept, the rehearsal, the moment humanity confirms it can position people on the moon safely and return them home again, paving the pathway for stays that extend longer each time until they are not stays at all, but permanent assignments. Because the moon's reduced gravity makes launches economical, its potential for fuel production makes it a strategic launching platform. Its unique far side offers radio silence perfect for astronomy, and its position in space makes it the optimal first waypoint for any mission heading deeper into the solar system. The first organization to construct lasting operational infrastructure there will not just win a competition. They will establish the parameters for how every future mission beyond Earth is strategized, financed, and executed for decades to come. And right now, piece by piece, mission by mission, rover by rover, China is establishing that foundation on a surface that once appeared like a concluded chapter in human history. The moon was never a finished story. It turns out it was only the introduction. If this transformed how you think about the moon, hammer that like button and subscribe so you never miss what emerges next. Activate notifications because this story is far from concluded, and we will document every major development as it unfolds. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. If a moon base is operational and functioning by 2050, would you genuinely sign up to live there?